You know, bands change their sound all the time as years go on, but very rarely do you go from this to this. Nowadays it may not seem that unusual, but bands tend to kind of slowly change their sound over time, but this band took like a quick turn from what their debut album sounded like to their current album. And with the Regrets, they were a band that had a lot of energy to them to now just being more of a pop band, and that's leading me to believe that hey, they're never going to put out anything as good as their debut record. That's not me saying that the two records that followed it aren't good either, but when you look at the debut album, which is titled Feel Your Feelings Full, which was released on January 13th, 2017, those two albums can't even compare to it. I'm like nobody else, so you can just go fuck yourself. Now, who are the Regrets? Well, the Regrets are categorized as a pop-punk riot girl band that was formed in 2015, and the original members were Lydia Knight, Janessa Garano, Sage Chavis, and Marley Murphy. However, she left early and was replaced by Max Mirando around that time. You're probably also wondering, what the hell is Riot Girl? Well, it's a genre of music basically that's categorized as a member of a movement of young feminists associated with aggressive punk rock style of music. So basically, it's punk rock for feminists. And it's been around since the 1990s and was basically, you know, kind of formed in Washington, D.C. was the main area that it was, you know, started. So you can already tell where the inspirations were coming from this band when it started. And on the album Feel Your Feelings Full, it's definitely present. There's punk, there's the Riot Girl sound, and a lot of these songs are definitely, well, very feminist leading in a way, as it has a lot to do with girl power, you know, kind of being able to find yourself at a young age and kind of just telling everyone who's doubting you or whatnot to just kind of fuck off and leave you alone. This was an album that was pretty unique in itself because the lead singer, Lydia Knight, was young. She was 16 years old by the time this thing released. So, of course, when you're a kid, you definitely have things you're gonna write about and sing about now that you won't particularly do as an adult. But for the most part, her lyric writing on this record was not necessarily subpar. Again, she was 16 years old, so you're gonna get that whole kind of like, I hate life stuff, all this, life is so hard, when really you don't know the half of it until you're older. But what makes this album so cool is the intensity's there. Everything is so catchy, and it all seems to come together one way or another. As the four singles, although all different from each other, all pretty much have the same meaning, which is Living Human Girl, Hey Now, Hot, and Seashore, and they all kind of play off this thing of, you know, Lydia being this younger girl who is being criticized for being who she is now, but the thing is, she hasn't really found herself yet, and she's starting to just feel comfortable with who she is and the way she looks and all this kind of stuff, and is getting to a point where she's not going to let people tell her who she herself is. It's basically a big fuck you to, I guess you can say, the trolls and just the people who, I guess, are against her and her views in a way. She's kind of fighting back and just becoming her own independent self. But as we've seen over the years, the band has slowly drifted away from that. When you get to their second album, How Do You Love, it's definitely still the same sound, but you can start to see that a change was coming within the band and their sound. As although the punk rock and the Riot Girl sound was still there, there was also a lot more, I guess you can say, pop-leaning songs. Not full-on pop, but definitely songs that you wouldn't have heard on their first record. A song like I Dare You, for example. It's one of their bigger songs to date, and it was actually written by Julian Casablancas from The Strokes. Fun fact about that. You listen to that song compared to something off of their first record, and you would never put two and two together that it's the same band, but it is. But when this came out in August 19th of 2019, you gotta look at where Lydia Knight was in her life now. She is 18 years old, about to be 19, so she's starting to see how adulthood is going to treat her, so things became a little bit more mature. Sure, lyrically there was still, things that teenagers would sing about, but that comes, that goes, and then when we get to 2022, when their album Further Joy released, that's when everything you knew from the band, you could just throw right out the window.
Gotta get the fuck out of LA. Run from the sun before it burns my brain.
Now everybody in the band is in their 20s. Two members actually left at this point. Sage and Max left while Brooke Dixon and Drew Thompson joined, and now they aren't even a punk rock riot grrrl band anymore. They took more of a synth pop new wave type sound, and basically they changed a lot of lyricism as to what they used to sing about, as now these songs, especially the ones off of the deluxe edition, seem to be more about, even when you get into adulthood, you start to realize more about yourself that you may not have known when you were younger, and you also start to, I guess, look back at things when you were younger and how it's changed and all this sort of stuff.
What I wanna do to be somebody with a sense of place.
Basically, it's an album about growing up, and yeah, it caught a lot of fans off guard, but I still think it's a hell of a record. But what I was so disappointed in was that it was a record where the intensity just completely just goes down, and it seems like it doesn't exist anymore. That's what made the Regrets so fun on their first record. Even their second record had some level of intensity, but this third record, it just kind of, I don't want to say falls flat anywhere, because like I said, I like it, but it definitely just kind of has the formulaic sound, whereas the first two records, they didn't really stick with a certain formula. They just kind of, went with what they wanted to go with, and that was that. But again, I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, they shouldn't have changed this, that, and the other. Bands have the right to change, and I feel like bands, when they change their sound, it's always good for them because it gives us something new and different, as opposed to this, getting the same thing over and over and over again. But sometimes taking it slow is the best way to go, and the Regrets just kind of went, okay, whatever we did on our first two albums, we're just going to completely ditch that and go into the new. And I think it just took fans for a loop, and even took some people a little while to get used to, because I do know that a lot of the older fans that came around during their, more punkier days are going to be disappointed, but all in all, it's not that bad. But now that everybody in the band is older, especially Lydia herself, and she's gone through a lot of dark shit in her life. I mean, if you look at a couple years ago, she called out Swimmer's drummer Joey Armstrong for basically, grooming her when she was 16 years old and he was 22, into doing some sexual acts that you are not supposed to do with a 16-year-old. And because she has more mature things to sing about, going back to the more angry sounding riot grrrl punk thing just doesn't seem on the cards for them anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't necessarily know if it would seem as genuine as it would when they released their debut album 6 years ago. I feel like if they were to go back and do that, it would just feel forced at this point. I look at it in this super just positive way of, they created this when they were young and they were going through some shit then, but, as a teenager and you get older, you kind of get over that, and trying to continue to force yourself to be that person becomes really hard. So when they changed, I thought it was for the better, and I really wasn't surprised, but their debut record to me will still always be my favorite for the sheer fact that it's just so aggressive and in your face, and it's like, I don't give a fuck what you think, this is who I am. It can be relatable to many people in many ways, but yet so could their other two records. So basically, growing up isn't too bad. Sure, there's bad things about it, but you also find out more about yourself than maybe you wouldn't have when, say, you were 15, 16 years old. I mean, I know myself, about to turn 25, have learned a lot more about me than I would have at age 15, 16. Like, I am definitely not the same person I was in high school, and if I were to see my high school self now, I would probably slap him. So, just enjoy the time you had when you were younger, reminisce on the times, and just get over the bad times that happened, and feel free to move on with your life as you enter adulthood, and don't be afraid to change yourself. Not necessarily completely change yourself, but if there's definitely some things about you, maybe personality-wise, that you've never really liked and you try to change that, I feel like that is a mature thing to do, but never take away who you truly are. Always be yourself and grow as you get older. But until then, that is it for me. You should check out the Regrets debut album, Feel Your Feelings Full, if you haven't. Trust me, even 6 years later, it is still a masterpiece and still one of my favorites. And until then, I will catch you all in the next one.